Why is it so quiet in here? Really? This is unusually awkward. Okay, we're going to pretend that it's 6 o'clock because I think my phone says it's 6:02, so our clock is slow. So we will begin. That'll fill up the quiet space. Welcome to the Clovis City Council meeting. We are glad that you are here. Whether you are here in person or you are here online or you are here on the phone, we are glad that you are here and participating with us in local government. The meetings are open to the public, and we are at our City Hall at 1033 Fifth Avenue. And there are a number of ways that you can participate in this, so we hope that you are engaged with your community. You can access our webcast at www.cityofclovis.com/agendas. You can provide written comment at that website, join by phone, or you could actually come in person, which is nice to see those of you here tonight. So with that, I will call the meeting to order, and I will ask Mayor Pro Tem Mwanatua to lead us in the flag salute. Thank you. Carrie?
Councilmember Baskell?
Here.
Councilmember Bessinger?
Here.
Councilmember Mwanatua?
Here.
Councilmember Pierce?
Here.
And Mayor Ashbeck.
I am here. First on our agenda tonight is public comment. This is a chance for folks in the audience or online to speak to the council on an item that is not on our agenda tonight. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone in the chambers who has an item to talk to us about that is not on our agenda? Seeing none, watch this, you ready? Anybody on the web?
No.
I got it. All right, so we will move along. Next is ordinance and resolutions. With respect to the reading of these, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there is a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Next are consent items. These items are considered routine in nature. They're acted upon with one single vote. A council member's vote on the item is the consent calendar is an affirmative vote on the entire calendar item. People can ask to have an item removed off the agenda as required. So tonight we are going to take consideration of items 1 through 5 on the consent calendar, and we're going to take a motion for that if there's interest, and then Council. Mayor Pro Tem Mwanatua is going to recuse himself from item number 6. So with that, is there anyone on the council that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none. Anyone in the public wishing to have an item pulled from the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion on the consent calendar items 1 through 5.
Motion to approve consent calendar items 1 through 5.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And then with Mayor Pro Tem Mwanatua recusing himself from item number 6, I will entertain a motion on item number 6.
Move to approve item number 6.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to approve item number 6. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Did I do that right?
We might have just missed the public comment.
I think I did that. Well, is there any public comment on what we just did? We can undo it. It's Clovis, no problem. All right. All right, public hearings. A public hearing is an item for open consideration within our regular meeting, and they are published in advance, and you have them on your agenda in front of you. The first item is considering approval of CUP 2022-005, an appeal. This is to consider the resolution denying a request by George Beal to overturn the Planning Commission's approval of CUP 2022-005, which allows a 24-hour convenience store and the sale of liquor and alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption on the property located on the northeast corner of North Temperance Avenue and Owens Mountain Parkway. Dave Verk LLC is the owner applicant. Bottom Line Group LLC, Seth Ramirez, owner's representative. George Beal Developments LLC is the applicant of appeal. John, you want to make some comments on this item?
Briefly, Mayor, Member of City Council, staff has recommended this item be continued to a date certain, which is January 9th, 2023, and that's due to last-minute information that came up that would allow the applicant time to do some research and come back to the City Council in January. That concludes staff's report, and we are available for questions if we wanted to get into it.
Questions for staff?
As I understood it, the reason for the continuance is because EBC give us further information. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. In the event that, well, I guess we can discuss this on the 9th, but if that information was not given to us by EBC and the Planning Commission approved it without that knowledge, I think that the applicant should be refunded his money. We'll talk about that later.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? So, John, there are folks here, I think, to speak to this item. So may I open the public comment, hear the comment, and then...
Correct. We're not opening up the public hearing, but a public comment is completely acceptable.
So let me open public comment on this item, since I think there are some folks that may want to comment on the continuance, I think, at this point, not on the matter particularly. So anyone wishing to comment on this item and its continuance? If you'd state your name and address for the record, that would be great. Oh, you got to push the button.
Okay, there you go. Seth Ramirez, 6781 North Palm in Fresno, and I appreciate all of you and all the staff's time working on this item. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We do accept the continuation of this item until the January 9th meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth. Questions for Mr. Ramirez? All right. Anyone else wishing to comment on this item?
Oh, right there. Mayor, members of the council, I'm George Beal. My address 1175 Shaw Avenue, City of Clovis. I don't have an issue with moving this item to January 9th, is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here, George. Anyone else in the chamber is wishing to comment on the continuation of this item? Anyone online?
No.
All right, close the public portion of this. Is this it's a continuation to a date certain, January 9th is correct?
Correct.
I'll entertain a motion to continue item number 7 to January 9th.
So move. Second.
There's a motion and a second to continue this item, as stated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0 to continue this item till January 9th. Thank you. Don't go. You can stay the whole meeting if you want. You don't have any experience here, Orlando. You should probably go. All right. The next item is item number 8, consider approval of resolution of the City of Clovis making findings and a determination to authorize a certificate of tentative cancellation for land conservation contract number 6273 for property located near the southeast corner of Shaw and DeWolf Avenues. Precision Civil Engineering, Inc. is the applicant. Frank and Georgia W. Sorrente are the property owners. I also understand this will be continued. Do you want to comment on that, John?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Staff has recommended that this item be continued to a date uncertain. The applicant was not able to complete certain paperwork, and they're working on it, but we don't have a date, so staff is recommending it be continued to a date uncertain.
All right. Thanks. Questions for staff? And I think for the newer council members, a date uncertain means it will be renoticed again when it is calendared on our item, on our agenda. Yeah? All right. Any questions for staff? Anyone in the chambers here to talk about item number 8? Anyone online? No. I'm getting this down. So good. 2, 3 for 3. I'll bring it back to the council. Would entertain a motion to continue this to a date uncertain.
Make a motion to continue it.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Drew. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0 to continue item number 8 to a date uncertain. You know, I'm good at this Mayor thing because we've just gone through like 8 items and it's 6:09. You know, I got this down. I got this. All right. I think it's going to slow down considerably with the finance department, but I say that with great love. Don't worry. Don't worry. Next on our agenda, item number 9 is a receive and file a finance department update, and the staff on this is our finance director, Jay Schengle.
Mayor, I wanted to jump in on the front end of this, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, it doesn't say that. You're
That
slowing
is
down my
correct.
roll here.
I apologize. But what I wanted to make a brief comment in that we do have 2 new council members. I did put together a schedule of what I'd like to have the individual departments come back to City Council for basically some information on the individual departments and what they do, their staffing, where their funding comes from, that type of thing. I'm going to try and tie it to an item on the agenda, so they might have something on the agenda. And before you on the screen is going to be a tentative schedule. It's probably going to change from that, but this is when I plan to have the individual departments come back and do a 15-minute intro on what their departments do, and it'd be an opportunity for council to ask some questions. Once this is complete, they're going to jump into the 2 interesting reports.
Did you say 2 interesting reports?
Interesting.
Did you say that about finance reports, 2 interesting reports, really?
Some of you have been here before.
Thank you, and I would encourage Matt and Diane, these are not intended to be full finance or department briefings, so certainly anything you need offline, I would encourage you to spend time with staff if you haven't already done that. But so with that, Mr. Schengle, interesting report number 1. Go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I just want to take a few moments this evening to tell you a little bit about myself, my department, and give you just a little bit of introduction of the finance department. I've been here 17 years. I've been in 3 different positions with the city. I'm currently the finance director and have been for the last 6 years. I was born and raised in the city of Clovis. I went to school here. I work here, I live here, I'm pretty much all in with the city of Clovis. So I love my department, I love what I do, I love the cooperation that this city has between all the departments. It's unique in a sense that I've never worked for anybody else like the city of Clovis. So I value this job and this city a lot. With that, next to me, I have Jeff Blanks. He's my deputy finance director. And then back there, I have the rest of my professional team. So I have my other 3 managers and my accountants. Most of what I bring to you here involves them, and without them, I could not do this. So take a look at my department. I'm 21 people strong out of the city's 600 employees. So I consider myself small and mighty. So there's 4 manager doers, including myself and Jeff. There's 3 accountants sitting in the audience as well. And then I have some principal account clerks and accounting system techs that also. So everything that we do is done by basically right now 20 people. So not a lot of people, a whole lot of work. If you take a look at what we do as a department, any of the financial reporting that's reported out to the council basically comes through my department if it involves numbers. We help prepare the forecast and the budgeting with the city manager's help. The utility billing and collections all goes through my department. So the 37,000 rooftops that we bill utilities, water, sewer, refuse, we bill out and we collect on a semi-monthly basis. Every other month basis. We administer the business license and dog licensing programs through my department, and we also process the 600 full-time employees on a semi-monthly basis in-house. So we do all the payroll in my department. We administer the accounts receivable and accounts payable, so all the money that's owed to us and all the money that we owe somebody else comes through my department as well. And we invest the cash that is sitting idle at any one time with one of the many funds that we have with the city. So currently we have about $300 million that we are investing for all the department's benefit. And then lastly, the debt issuance administration. So any of the debt that the city issues goes through my department. So for example, Landmark Square that we recently debted, I went out, I did all the work related to the financing, getting the bond people sold, and then ultimately we administer the bonds until maturity. So basically all the debt issuance and administration goes through my department. So to quantify some of those things that I just mentioned, we do approximately 11,000 accounts payable checks, which is approximately 200 a week, but we're constantly paying vendors on a regular basis 52 weeks out of the year. We do approximately 15,000 payroll checks, so those are all of our employees that expect accurate paychecks twice a month. And to quantify the 37,000 rooftops, that's roughly 220,000 billings and collections. So we have a lot of money going out and coming in through my department. The utility is one of the major things that we do as a department, that those 20 staff, a decent portion of them only do the utility portion of it. And lastly, we do about 5,000 business licenses. That's currently what we have operating legally in the city of Clovis right now. And then, ironically enough, we have about 7,000 dog licenses. So we probably have considerably more dog licenses, but that's how many tell us that they have FIDO. So if we look at the city budget for the 22-23 citywide, we're looking at almost $300 million, and you kind of look at what makes that city budget up on an annual basis. Public safety makes up approximately a quarter of all of those dollars. Police and fire, public utilities, the water, sewer, refuse, they make up approximately 25% as well. And then the internal service, which is our internal fund, so that's basically our fleet, our general services, facilities maintenance, insurance, they make up a quarter. So basically, those three make up 75% of the revenues that come in. And then the last big chunk is capital improvements. Those are our streets and roads. Those are our sewer, water infrastructure. That's basically what comprises, on an annual basis, our $300 million budget. So if you look at how we split up the governmental fund types, the general fund is the major operating fund of the city. That's the one that gets the most review, scrutiny. That's the one where all the administration is in, public safety is in, our parks, our recreation programs, senior services, and even the more obscure ones like street lighting. Those are all part of the general fund. On the enterprise fund side, those are funds that we run typically like a business. Those are the closest that we have to a private business operations that they charge for their services in order enough to collect for their services. So refuse, wastewater, water, planning and development services, those are all basically charging out for their services. The one exception up there is transit. It is a little bit of an anomaly in that it does get quite a bit of grants, Measure C, those type of programs, sales tax related, that have go into that fund that allow for us to currently waive the ridership fees as part of that. So that's really the one exception up there that is quasi-business. The internal service funds, again, those are the funds that basically the customers are the city of Clovis. So the facilities maintenance keeps track of all of our facilities and repairs. The insurance is our property and liability insurance. They just charge out simply what it costs to insure the city. And the fleet maintenance is basically our internal program to keep our cars, our fire trucks, you name it, running. So those are kind of the three major type of funds that we kind of split everything into. If you look at our revenue sources citywide, sales tax and property tax are noticeable up there because they're about 11% each, and those are two of kind of the more important taxes that are up there as far as how much they are and what that means in a minute. The charges for services, that 36 light green up there, that's basically our enterprise funds charging out for their services. So those are our business operations basically charging out. And then the charges to other departments in yellow, that's really us charging ourselves for those ones that I just mentioned, basically your fleet, your general services. That is us keeping us running. So if you take a look at our revenue types, you kind of split the revenues into two flavors, discretionary and non-discretionary. So on the discretionary side, basically that means that under city council direction, we can spend those dollars on whatever you want to spend them on. Those are basically your tax dollars. Those are your property tax, your sales tax, your TOT, business license, any of those tax type items are that blue sliver, and you can spend it on whatever you guys want to spend it on. The red ones, the 75%, is predominantly the ones that you can't spend in anywhere you want. So if, for instance, a refuse charges out for their services, we can't take that money and spend it on something other than refuse. It's restricted to that particular purpose. And that you find that 3 out of $4 are basically non-discretionary in what we do as a city. So for a couple small examples, if we take our major revenue sources on the tax side, which is our property tax and our sales tax, for every $100 that we collect on the property tax side, so the county collects from us homeowners on an annual basis $100 in taxes. Basically, the city gets approximately $13 of those taxes. The other 87 go to other agencies. So they go to the county, they go to the school district, they go to special districts. So we don't get a majority of those property taxes locally that the homeowners pay and the businesses. If you look at the same thing on the sales tax side, our sales tax rate here is approximately 8% basically. So if you go out and buy a $100 shirt and pay the $8 in taxes, City of Clovis gets 95 cents. The other $7 goes to, again, other agencies, mainly the state general fund, to be honest. So of the property taxes and sales taxes that you saw on the previous slide, very little that the taxpayer is paying actually gets to the local level. Most of it is consumed in other areas outside of locals. So lastly, my department basically presents 3 larger documents. The one tonight here soon is the annual comprehensive financial report. This is our annual financial statement that we are basically looking back here as of June 30th in a moment in time. Auditors come in and audit it, test transactions, and we report out to council on an annual basis somewhere in December related to that document. After that document is put aside and we hit after Christmas, New Year's, we will start with the 5-year forecast process, which is basically the beginning of the budget season. So we will take everything that we learned from the annual financial statement, we'll put it and look at where we're at budgetarily currently, and then we'll build out the 5-year forecast as the start for our annual budget. So when we come to you in March, we are telling you this is kind of where we think we're headed on the short and long term. We then come to council and develop the budget in May for adoption in June. So these 3 documents are related in a sense, a moment at a time. They happen every year and they happen consistently at the same time each year. So with that, that's the really shorter version of my department, who I am and what I do, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thanks, Jay. Are there questions for Jay and the finance team? Excellent. I decided if you could take your dog to the vet and get a license from your vet, you'd have a lot more than 7,000 dogs.
Yes. We have considered other ways to approach the dog license issue. The administration, to be honest, far outweighs the revenues that we receive for it. You know, it's a service of the community, making sure that the animals are protected, rabies, certificates, those kind of things, but the administration is a heavy lift for...
There has to be some way to, I mean, literally, they ask you for all the same things that you do, and I'm standing right there, and couldn't I just pay them?
Yeah.
But anyway, you're welcome. That's my idea.
Thank you.
Make it 9,000 dogs.
They wrote it down.
Just kidding. Thank you for what you do. Thank you to the finance team. I was giving you a bad time earlier, but we are grateful for what you do. I don't do math, but you all do math extremely well, so thank you for what you do. All right. That is the receive and file on the finance department, so thank you, Jay. Next up, I think it continues to be the Jay and Jeff presentation here. Item number 10 are the final amendments to the 21-22 budget in conformance with our budget ordinance, and it's also a receive and file year-end report for all funds as of June 30th, 2022. Back to you.
Thank you. So I have 2 reports for you this evening. This one does require action at the end of the presentation. The annual financial statement that follows this, there's nobody in my department that knows more about that document than Jeff. So when we get there, Jeff's going to present that one, but I will take the lifting on the annual report. So this report here, for council's benefit, compares on a budgetary basis where we were when we made estimates in the spring for the budget versus where we actually landed. So in order to build next year's budget, we have to have the best idea, guess, in this case, of where we think we're going to land as we build out what's available for next year and where we're going to land for this year. So this report basically compares where we thought we were going to be to where we landed last year. So it's a report out to council on revenues and expenditures as far as estimates to actuals. So if you kind of take the report and divide it into 4 somewhat meaningful sections, there's basically the revenues in the general fund, how we did versus how we thought we did, the expenditures in the same way, and then we take a brief look at other non-general funds, and then finally the budget amendment and transfers that's necessary to bring the budget into compliance.
You refer to a report. Are you talking about staff report? Yes. Or something else?
Staff report.
I was looking for a binder.
No.
No. Okay.
This is one of the smaller documents.
That's what I just want to make sure in case anybody else was looking for it. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So first, we're going to take a look at the general fund, and so our unallocated fund balance. So in other words, the funds that we have available to spend in the future ended at $8.4 million, or approximately $3 million more than what was projected during the budget process. So that $3 million is $3 million more than what we estimated, and it's mainly comprised of two reasons. Our revenues were higher than what we originally estimated, and our department saved money on where they said they were going to be versus where they actually landed. So my revenues were approximately 1.7 more, or 2%, and my expenditures were 1.3 less than what we said and did during the budget process. Put it in some perspective, the budget now is approximately $100 million. That's 1% and 2% to the plus or the minus. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not a lot of movement as far as where we thought we were going to be and where we landed. And you'll see that in various charts. So if we take a look at what we call estimate to close, which is where we think we're going to land on the left, this is where the city's best estimates are on the revenues, in the red and the blue is the expenditures. On the left, this is where we thought we were going to be. So we thought we were going to be at $102 million in revenues and $87 in expenditures. In reality, on the right is where we landed, which was $1.7 million better, $103 million, and $86 million on the expenditures. So you can see from where we did the budget process to where we landed, there's not a lot of variation in where we thought we were going to be. Nothing moved significantly from where we did it during the budget process versus what we thought. So this chart here lays out the major types of revenues. So on the bottom axis is sales tax, property tax, from other agencies, business license. The blue is your estimate to close, or where we thought we were going to be, and the actuals are the green. So the far two on the left, the sales tax and the property tax, that's really where your $1.7 million that came in higher than expected resides. And really, it's in that sales tax. The sales tax just came in a little bit higher than what we originally anticipated during the budget process. If we look for departments and where those monies, where those expenditures estimated and where they came in, you'll see that the major general fund kind of departments, council, clerk, attorney, finance, police, and fire, we all came in really close to where we thought we were going to be. The savings happened to be a little bit in police, a little bit in fire, and a little bit in city attorney. That's what makes up that small difference of the savings of the 1.3. The rest of us basically came in at estimates. So if you look at this idea of unrestricted fund balance, or what you have to be able to carry forward in the future to spend, over the last several years, we've basically we've closed the year with more than what we've expected, because our revenues, sometimes in nature, have come in a little bit higher than we expected, or we've had a little bit more savings in our departments versus what they've kind of committed to hold their budgets to. So every spring, city manager asks the departments where they're going to come in, and then we hold them to it. And then on top of that, sometimes things aren't exactly like that. We save a little bit more money. We have some vacancies. We don't spend every dollar in the services, materials, and supplies. So it causes this small difference in what this fund balance is. Ultimately, this money is then repurposed in the future, the next budget year typically, for some type of budget amendment related to maybe unforeseen expenditures related to a project. So this is basically what was in the account at 6/30/22. Now, Jeff, when he does the financial statements here shortly, he will go into a little bit different of what that is and what that current balance is after June 30th. So that concludes kind of the general fund portion. So then on the staff report, we basically tried to also list those other funds and where they landed versus where we thought they were going to land. We make estimates with those just like we do with the general fund. The enterprise funds, the water, sewer, refuse, they all came in a little bit more than what we expected or anticipated, a little bit conservative, or in a lot of cases we just have capital deferrals that we've put in the estimates and then they didn't come to fruition before June 30th. So a lot of times we'll have more than we expected just because we've deferred something that we thought in March and April that just didn't happen by year end. Transit and Planning and Development Services, they were close to their estimates. And the last group, those internal service funds, those property and liability, the fleet, the employee benefits, most of those came in close to what we expected. There was some savings in employee benefits where health insurance and workers' comp didn't quite come into the expenditure level that we originally anticipated. In the general government services and fleet, really what we're having here is we have budget dollars in their budget, and they just haven't been able to necessarily spend it because they have had issues with procuring cars, trucks, tractors, you name it. There's been issues with the supply side. So a lot of what's in their budget, they just haven't spent, and then normally we will end up reappropriating that again into the future so that they can spend those dollars in the future. So what I need this evening from council is I need the approval of the resolution for the couple items. One of them is for the budget resolution related to the fire department. Technically, fire is over budget because of the call-outs and the different things, so I need a budget amendment to basically bring them into budgetary compliance. And then there's some transfers to and from the different funds that are cleanup related to things that we've done during the budget year, and this is typically when we clean them up. So for example, the general government to general government facilities, we move too much in development impact fees one way, we are just moving them back, for example. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Jay. Just for those here and online, the amounts of those budget amendments that you're asking for are in the staff report on page 76?
Yes.
Right? So fire department, $158,000. So they are in the document.
They are in the document and they are in the resolution.
All right.
And attachment.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any questions for Jay? Juan?
Thank you for the report, Jay, and for your department. I had a question with regards to inflation. How much did that impact what we projected and where we ended? It seemed like we did a good job preparing for all that in this last fiscal year. Can you kind of speak to that?
The department and the city in general do an excellent job at estimating all of those factors, including inflation. So basically the departments have lived within their means, they've adjusted to their budget, and in most cases it probably means that they pulled back their spending in order to stay in budgetary compliance. So they probably did not purchase to the level or quantity originally desired because of the inflationary pressures that everything just costs more. You're also seeing that to some extent on the construction side as well, as we have myself, Planning and Development Services, we have come back with project revisions. You've seen that the costs are doing nothing but increasing. So on that side, we're forced to finish the construction project, but otherwise we are just purchasing less of certain things and then programming in the next budget year realistically what we can put in there for that inflation.
And that applies to both sort of the general fund departments and also the enterprise funds, because I saw the enterprise funds, we ended up pretty close to what we were projecting.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But the real challenge is going forward as, general fund, for instance, those expenses are real and they're increasing. Your revenues are not increasing at that same rate. There is going to be that challenge and crossover. So where the general fund isn't always, my career here has been constrained, those inflationary pressures will cause issues at the end when it comes down to funding all of those requests from the departments.
Okay. And the only thing I would add to that, Councilmember Monotuna, is when you're talking about inflation, is going to be that in the current budget, when we did it, we estimated that the bargaining unit negotiations would cost the city approximately 3.66%. The reality is, at the end of the day, it came up closer to 7%. So that is going to account for, out of the $100 million, about a $3.5 million increase between the ongoing and one-time payments.
Okay. I think in the revenues part, where were the ARPA funds? And we probably won't see that bump anymore. So are we accounting for that? Is it next year we'll hear more about how we'll budget differently because we had that big bump this last year?
In a lot of cases, as it relates to the budget, we intentionally left some of the ARPA funding out of there, at least related to the first tranche. And then we came back to council basically to suggest using those funds for one type scenarios, whether that's rebuilding the fleet program or deferred maintenance on the general services. We're using those funds currently to fund one-time projects, whether it be a fire station that's falling down or something. Nothing's been identified specifically for the ARPA funds, but we have put those funds in total aside for some of those one-time projects.
And I'm assuming that it's pretty much been accounted for then.
Right. And
most
sorry,
of it.
Jeff Blank, Deputy Finance Director. So yeah, you'll see that also when we get to forecasting and budget, where the money from other agencies will go down in comparison to a prior year, because you'll see that those kind of one-time monies have already hit and been recorded. And so in the future, our money from other agencies, you know, unless there's more money coming, which there doesn't seem to be, it'll be quite a bit less.
Well, one of those places you'll really see it is in that 5-year forecast, when you get to actually see your actual revenues in those categories, and then you'll see it go away. You'll be able to see the effect of those one-time revenues coming in and then no longer in the future.
Okay. And then with the sort of the budget amendments, the number doesn't change. It's still the 3.3 million, correct? Even with the budget amendments, that is still sort of the surplus amount?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so with our cleanup, it doesn't change that, because I saw that there's still 1 million, you know, fire station 2. So in other words, it accounts for, all that has been accounted for.
Yes.
And we saw the 3 million.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Other questions for staff? All right, thank you. And let me open the public comment. Anybody in the chambers wishing to comment on this? Like everyone from the finance team to say something. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Anyone in the chambers? Anybody online?
No.
All right, we'll bring it back here. We will take a motion on the first part of that item, and I would entertain a motion to accept the final amendments to the 2021-22 budget in conformance with the budget ordinance.
A motion to approve the resolution with the final amendments to the 2021-22 budget in conformance with the budget ordinance.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to consider those final amendments. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up is the 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And this is a approval action, and this will be Jay and Jeff, or maybe both.
Jeff Blank, Deputy Finance Director. I'm going to go ahead and tackle this one. So I'll be walking through briefly the 21-22 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. This covers the period from July 1, 21 to June 30, 22. As Jay mentioned, really the review cycle here, we start with a forecast and a budget in the kind of the first part of the calendar year. This ACFR really is the actuals and the look back to what's happened in the prior fiscal year, and then we come back around to it. Just briefly, the Government Finance Officer Association, they have a certificate program for the production of this document that we submit. We submit our document to. The city's received it 33 consecutive years. We're assuming we will get our 34th with this document. It's really just a testament to, again, staff and their work that we've been eligible and have received this award, because it's really a highly technical document. In terms of requirements, by law, state law, we're required to produce an audited set of financial statements annually. The Poon Group have audited these financial statements, and they provided us what's called an unmodified or clean opinion, which is the opinion you're looking for. Along those lines, there have been no audit findings for the current year, which is a good thing. And then just briefly on the document itself, obviously a lot of pieces to it. Really kind of the focus tends to be in the financial statement area, so your government-wide fund, your notes to the financials, which are really important and also really dense. So if you're looking for some great late-night reading material, I'd recommend it. You have your supplementary information, which is additional statements. But then what makes it an ACFR is really the transmittal, the management discussion and analysis, and then the statistical section, which you'll find towards the back. Single audit report, not necessarily, it's part of the book, but it is separate, and that single audit is really covering the federal programs that, the federal money we receive, those programs. It's a separate audit that's performed by the auditors as well. So fund financial statements, Jay went into it a little bit. I've kind of given some page numbers here as well. Your governmental funds, again, general fund, your roads, some of those, they're used to account for tax-supported activities. Your enterprise funds, again, your business type, which is providing services to users. Internal service funds, again, it's like the business type activities, but it's aimed at your internal departments. The other one I'll mention, which is in this book and reported, is fiduciary funds. These are resources that the government holds on behalf of either individuals or other governments or entities. These resources can't be used for the government's own purposes, but we hold them and therefore we're required to report on them. So just a couple of reminders. I'll skip kind of the top bullet, but fund balance and cash are different things. Really, fund balance is the accumulation of assets less any outstanding liabilities. There's also some flavor to the fund balance that I'll get to here in a moment, but really important to note that. So what we've done here, just kind of a condensed version of the general fund. I'm sorry, it's pretty small. But you have kind of your beginning fund balance, your revenues, expenditures, and then what are known as other financing sources or uses. In this case, those are transfers, and then your net change. So you kind of walk through the two different years, and you can see the growth in fund balance year over year there. This chart is to talk about kind of the what are known as kind of economically sensitive revenues, your property tax, sales tax, business license, franchise, and TOT. You can see the growth there year over year, 13% in sales tax, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but pretty large, really substantial and fairly abnormal growth over the last 2 years. Emergency reserves, so the beginning balance was roughly 16.4. We added another 3 million. So the ending balance there is 19.4. That's part of your assigned fund balance within your general fund, and it represents roughly 23% of operating expenditures. City goal is to maintain roughly 25%. That's a best practice type figure. And if you think about that, 25%, that's roughly 3 months worth of expenditures within the general fund. There's just kind of a chart, graphical representation there of the growth in the emergency reserve over the years, from roughly 11.6 up to 19.4. Again, just putting money into the emergency reserve as a good practice. So the fund balance by type, again, kind of the flavor of your fund balance, which is really important when you're kind of analyzing what's in there. We've laid out the restricted balances. Those are external restrictions. So those are resources that exist within the general fund, but they have to be spent in a specific way. In this case, most of that is for landscape maintenance. And then your assignments. So the amounts that go into assignments really represent, for the services, materials, supplies, those are your encumbrances and your reappropriations. And then, of course, your emergency reserve. So once you kind of walk those amounts out, what you have is really the residual, which is known as unassigned fund balance, and that's really kind of the available fund balance within the fund at 6/30. And that's the 8.4 number. Now, as Jay mentioned, so that 8.4 is as of 6/30. There have been some things that have obviously occurred since then. The 1.6 million was included in the 22-23 budget as the emergency reserve contribution or assignment. And then there have been a couple of budget amendments that have occurred since then, one for Landmark Square and one for the salary MOUs, as was briefly covered before, of roughly 3.6 million. So you're looking at roughly 1.9 million as available fund balance after you kind of walk those items out. And then in terms of enterprise funds, in evaluating them, it's important to just kind of look at revenues covering operating costs is really the biggest one. But then for those that have debt service, and those that have capital assets, significant capital assets or infrastructure, is sufficient money being raised to cover those things. Certainly something when we look at the stuff we do for bonds and bond disclosures and those rating agencies, that's what they're looking at when they're looking at the health of those funds and for debt service, is making sure we're raising enough money to cover those things. So really, in summary, the two largest discretionary revenues, they experienced pretty substantial growth. Again, the sales tax, double-digit growth over 2 consecutive years, which hasn't been experienced in over 25 years, which is, again, just very abnormal, not necessarily sustainable. Actually, looking kind of forward to this year, we're looking more at about 3% growth. The general fund reserve policy and the level, as I kind of walked through, and then the fund balances within enterprise and ISFs continue to increase. That's really all that I have. We're available for questions, comments. I believe our auditors are also available if you have any questions specific to anything that they can cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there questions for Jeff, Jay,
Yeah, I'm looking at page 146, 147, and I think this was an issue last year, I recall, and it's here again. And so I think it's talking about the CBDG funds and how 6 out of 6, work was done, no receipt, no documentation. 5 out of 6, work done, no documentation, and it's a federal funding that helps sort of the most needy. And I recall last year this sort of came up, and I understand that there were changes, and I think, Andy, you spoke to it as well last year, that this was something we were going to really change, make better, and yet it seems, they're checking, and then is it just because it was too close to when we had it last year and then nothing was in place, or why did we not improve much? Because, I think I know it wasn't major, but yet it's still noted, and for us to not have the documentation.
So just to cover that, so I think what you're looking at are the prior year findings in question costs.
So is that just prior year?
You'll note that, Section A there, so current year we didn't have any findings of question costs. They're required to repeat the ones from the prior year and then list whether or not that condition was met or what we had identified as corrective actions were implemented. And so page 148, the status is, you can note, is implemented. So pretty much what this is laying out is they've repeated that these findings existed last year and our corrective actions were implemented. And you can see in Section A that there were no findings or question costs this year. So we have corrected that issue.
So that A is for this year.
Yeah.
And then the B goes back and tells us what they did last year. That's why they're reviewing again this year.
Right. And they go back and look at it and give us a status update of was this implemented, in which case it was.
Then I want to, compliment the staff for fixing it as was promised to our citizens last year to this year. And so thank you, Andy, and I think Chad is overseeing this department now. We will continue to oversee these funds well as we move forward. So thank you. And also, the audit came out very clean again. And so excellent job to the staff and to all the departments and to John and all the staff for doing an excellent job. So that way it keeps us very, it's our duty to use wisely and also very, prudently the dollars that we receive from our taxpayers and our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you, Vaughn. Other questions or comments for staff? Matt?
Just a quick question. Going back to the slide where you said it was 8.6 million in June, was that right?
8.4, yes.
And then since June, it went down to 1.9 million?
Correct. If we wanted to walk that number forward with things that have happened since June 30th, those other 3 items have happened since that date. So council, through the budget process has assigned additional emergency reserves in this current budget year, and they also have done a budget amendment for Landmark Square for additional funds that were necessary. And so there was a transfer from the general fund to general services to pay for those additional costs in November. And this negotiated salary and benefits that was not known at the time of the budget that was done, that was finalized in July, was that additional $3 million. So those items have happened in July or after to get you to more representative of what is available now for your benefit.
Okay, so the 1.9 million would be available going forward in this year's budget?
Correct, as of right now, with no other budget amendments known to alter that number.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Anything else for staff? Anyone in the chamber, comments, questions on this item? Online?
No.
All right. Thank you.
Mayor, one more
Yeah, you bet.
general question for, in looking at sort of all that we're tied up in, when would we be in a position to be able to bond again? Is there a projected time frame?
It depends on what area you are thinking the need for bonding.
Okay.
So are you talking about in a water system capacity, a sewer system capacity?
Both of those, yes.
Okay. So currently the water's in a situation now where I could believe that if they had the need, they could bond currently based off their rate structure and how they look financially. Okay. The sewer system, as it currently stands with the rate structure, I do not believe is in a position to bond, okay, and would not be so until additional debt service was paid off or until rates were adjusted upwards to be able to take on that additional debt service. So the debt is known between now and the late 2030s, but until that debt service falls off, it doesn't allow for any additional bond capacity at the current rates, at least as of what we've recently looked at. So if the sewer system was to need additional bonding capacity, they're going to have to adjust their rates to take that bonding capacity on.
Thank you. And as of June till now, did the unemployment rate go any lower than 3.4, or does it kind of remain the same? That's what the report mentioned. Are we still around there?
So it held steady through November at 3.4.
Okay.
Jeff, Jay, two questions. Jeff, you made a comment when you were going through one of your earlier slides about sales tax at 13%, which was abnormally high. Do you want to talk anything more about that in terms of, I know this isn't a forecast, but I mean, this is a look back. We'll nod our hats to Bob, who's not here, who loves this document. So if you're listening, Bob, it's going well. You're welcome. But can you comment on the sales tax, your sense that it's abnormally high either way?
Yeah, no. I can comment. Thank you. Last year, sales tax growth was approximately 23%. You know, this last fiscal year ended, it was approximately 13%. When we did the 5-year forecast, we projected out 5%. You know, we missed the sales tax at year end to the good by about $1 million, but our growth currently is only sitting at about 3%. So we may end this fiscal year, with where we projected last 5-year forecast, but there's definitely a pullback in taxable sales that's happening now, and we are not currently hitting a year-over-year 5% growth that was projected. We may still get to the same place on the short term because the base is bigger.
And then I know this document probably wouldn't reflect that, but I think there's also a decline in housing starts and can't get PG&E, and those sorts of things that we may see in the next forecast.
There are a lot of current economic factors going on that could be considered negative or not positive. You know, there is a housing concern, affordability issues with interest rates. There's a number of factors that the 5-year most certainly will not look like it did last year, but that's to be expected as we reevaluate the document on an annual basis. There are a lot of pressures for those discretionary revenues and then coming in at what we had estimated.
I do think to the staff and to the whole team that I love the slide where our reserves went back up again. When I started in this spot, the reserves are pretty small, so I think it's just really an impressive trend line. Hard to do, but I think the discipline has been worth it, and we have weathered more difficult times better than most because of that. So nice job. Nice job. All right, thank you. This is an action item to approve the 2021 annual comprehensive financial report. I would entertain that motion if there was one.
Motion to approve the 2021-22 annual comprehensive financial report.
I'll second that.
There's a motion, a second, to approve the, I can't call it an ACFR. I think that is the silliest acronym ever, so I'll just read it out loud. To approve the annual comprehensive financial report. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you to the finance team. Appreciate all you do. Next item is item number 12. Hold on one second. Item number 12 is consider approval. I love paper, as you know. Hold on. Okay, I'm happy now. Consider approval, modifications to the 10-day public notice procedures for land use and planning projects from Planning and Development Services. I'll just say hallelujah to this, but before I say hallelujah, Renee Mathis and Dave Merchant.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. So we're bringing this item back to you tonight. It is to consider approval of modifications to our current noticing procedures. We're bringing it back because in the past, more recently in November, there were concerns when we had a public item that the residents didn't feel they had enough time as far as noticing, and that has been a common theme that we've seen over the years. So we took a hard look at what our current procedures were. We made some changes, and tonight Dave wants to present to you what those changes are so we can ensure that the public is getting the notice with enough time to then come in and participate either in person, online, call in, or have the opportunity to contact staff if they've got questions on our projects. So again, this is an item that we want your consideration and approval, and we also just want to inform you of what our practice will be moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Dave?
So nearly all of the public hearing items that come before you that involve land use applications and permits require two forms of public notice. One is typically a published notice that we publish in the Business Journal, which is our standard. And the second is a mailed public notice that we send to surrounding property owners. And we use different radius notices based on the type of application that's involved. State law requires that these notices get published or mailed 10 days in advance of the public hearing. Over time, the city developed an operating practice that notices were published and mailed about 14 days before public hearings. The reality, as Renee described, is that every once in a while, not every meeting, but every once in a while, city officials collectively, staff, planning commission, and the council we get feedback from neighbors that they hadn't received adequate notice. They just got their notice in the mail a couple of days before the meeting, and that's really the situation that we're trying our best to try to sort of meet in the middle a little bit, give better public notice without stretching out the process too far. I tend to think still, based on talking with people about what their experiences are and what we know about how we've handled noticing in the past, that the biggest problem that people have is that people just don't regularly check their mail. And when they do check their mail and grab their mail from their mailbox, it sits in a pile for a little while before they go through it. And that tends to have, leave them with a feeling that they just got a public notice when it may have been in their inbox or in their mailbox for a number of days. I'm not sure that we can fix all of those problems, but we're doing our best to add a few days into the process and eliminate some of the delays that we think may have contributed over time. We've had a couple of instances where we know there were delays in the mailing process. Sometimes that just is bad luck by hitting a holiday. We know we had some delays with our pre-sort service, picking up mail late, like on a Friday afternoon, and then somehow, even though it's supposed to get postmarked on the following Saturday, I think the last time this came up, we had folks that were telling us that they didn't have a postmarked notice until the following Monday. So the first thing we did is we pulled back the process. So instead of using a 14-day standard, we're going to use a 17-day standard. So we'll add, there's 3 days automatically to every mailing process, and then we'll take measure to extend that. If that 17th day happened to be Friday, we would pull it back and make sure that the mail got picked up by pre-sort on a Thursday to avoid that conflict, which we think probably has contributed at least once in a while to this little bit of a delay. So we think these measures collectively should put notices in mailbox about 2 weeks, about 14 days before public hearings, and that's reasonable, we think, given the state's 10-day notice limitation or minimum, while not overall extending the public hearing process considerably longer than it currently takes. So that's the proposal. We think it's a pretty good middle ground in terms of enhancing the notice process without extending it too much. And we'd like your feedback and approval if you think it works.
I'd like to just add, as part of the staff report, there's an example of the public notice format that we created. So all of our noticing that goes out follows that format. It gives a small description of the project, the time and day of the item to be presented before either Planning Commission or City Council, and a little bit about the project too. So you can see what that template looks like.
Thanks. Does that conclude your comments?
It does.
Thanks, Dave and Renee. Questions for staff? Vaughn.
You know, with the additional, say, 4 days, 3 days extra, will it create a situation where it may delay an application coming before us because now there's not enough time? Yet legally it's only 10, but we've created something which it could have came January 9th, but there's not enough time. You're going to have to go out even further. So does it create that, or not really, because we already know the dates and we can notify ahead of time?
I think the reality is that it can affect scheduling. There are some projects where we go really, really late into the process before we have a sort of a go, no-go situation. That's honestly what happened the last time this issue emerged with your body in November. We delayed all the way literally up until the day we had to send out notices, and we were waiting on a confirmation from the applicant that we didn't get until midday that day, and then we tried to produce 1,200 notices and get them into the mail that day. Any change to any change to the noticing process, we risk maybe having to bump a project now and again, but that's why I say it's a trade-off. We are enhancing the notice process. It may occasionally result in delaying when a project can be considered, but it's kind of the judgment call that we're asking you to make.
And Scott, will it withstand a challenge if we made it now 17 days and legally it's only 10? And so if someone wanted to say, hey, you made me delay now, because you required something that was more stringent, is that something that can withstand a challenge, a legal challenge?
Yeah, I think as Dave mentioned, or maybe Renee had mentioned, the state law is the minimum okay. Notice required. So it doesn't say you can't provide more notice. Now, we do have some additional permit streamlining stuff that we're required to get, an entitlement to either the Planning Commission or the City Council within a certain period of time. So I think that's what staff is kind of trying to find, that middle ground. We think with the additional 3 days, we're still meeting the state law minimum requirements, and we can go a little bit beyond that while still trying to meet all of the permit streamlining requirements and getting an item to either the Planning Commission or the City Council within the time required.
Were the industry, were they notified of, were they asked for comments so that way, or that way we can kind of get a feel from the industry to see if it will affect their business?
No, we didn't run this through the industry. We felt like there was really an operational change that shouldn't have a significant impact on average. Every once in a while, it might have an impact, but it's not something that we felt on a regular basis the industry would be affected by.
And my final question is, then in looking at all that we require, for example, public hearings to mailings to sort of the 800 feet, all that, operationally, this would still work and not create extra work where it would put staff in a scramble and or an applicant in a scramble to try to meet deadlines?
No, and I'll take that response. It's our job on the front end to let the applicant know of our processing procedures, so we will make sure on the front end that they understand for anything that requires public noticing. We are now shooting for 17 days prior to the meeting, so all of their application materials, we need to be complete, their project ready to go. We are quite accommodating, and we really try to work with applicants, and that's why sometimes it's the last minute where we're getting that notice put together. So I believe adding a couple of days, as long as we're honest or upfront on the front end, telling the applicant you need to have everything in, we can continue to work as a team on getting these projects through.
Okay. And these are only public hearings in front of us, or this all public hearings, for example, even if it's a CDBG workshop down in Tarpey or a Measure C community meeting? Is it everything that requires a public notice will now have this timeline, or only things that come before the council?
So this was prepared for Planning and Development Services and our land use, entitlements, and applications. I have talked with the other divisions within my department, because oftentimes we will send out notices for public workshops and the like. And so we will follow this practice of publishing, in the paper and sending out the notice 17 days in advance of holding that meeting.
Okay, so right now it's planning and development.
Mm-hmm. That's how this has been prepared in the procedures we've been following.
Okay, thank
you. Thank you. The business journal isn't generally the thing that people go pick up on a daily basis. Have we considered also posting this on our social media and website? And if we have and opted not to, what's the downside?
I believe that we typically broadcast our agendas on social media, but admittedly, I don't handle that directly, so I'll look to maybe Chad to nod his head or give us the better information.
Because it seems to be, looking at the notice of public hearing attachment, boom, there it is. It seems pretty simple, unless there's something I'm not seeing.
I think that when it is a citywide notice, we will generally put it on social media, and it'll land on our news section of the website. I think the neighborhood meetings, where it only applies to a certain region, that's when they notice out for maybe a certain number of feet around a project. It can become very confusing for a citywide notice to go out where folks may not have even seen or been on that street, and yet they get concerned because they don't know where that is. So that's why we haven't generally done it on our social media citywide.
I would just add to what Chad discussed. That's absolutely true on our larger projects, such as when we did the Shaw Avenue widening project and we held a public meeting. That was put on social media because we wanted the entire community to know we were holding this meeting. We wanted them to come out and hear about our project. So it depends on the type of project and the noticing requirements.
Okay, I accept that. Thank you.
Suzanne?
Yeah, kind of in line with that, is there an opportunity or ability to use something like the Nextdoor app that already segments people into neighborhoods or regions?
Exactly. When we do have the opportunity to geofence it, we will. It's not a perfect science because it breaks people into neighborhoods that are maybe not, it may go further out or too close. So now you're noticing 3 neighborhoods where really you only would be noticing maybe 25 residents.
Yeah.
And then it goes out to several hundred or several thousand. So it's not a perfect science, but as Renee mentioned, I'm glad she brought it up. Projects like the Shaw Avenue widening or Willow Avenue, we absolutely will throw that out to the entire city because it's such a widely used area.
And then my other question is just personal curiosity. Where do the radius criteria come from?
I believe that council many years ago provided some direction to staff to enhance the typical radius or the minimum radius required by law, which is 300 feet. We expanded that, and beyond that, I believe that the department has used that as a standard, or the set of criteria as a standard for at least a couple of decades. But I believe the original direction came from the council.
Thank you.
So just a couple of comments. I think the next door up is interesting. However, it's not your neighborhood anymore. I get things from Fresno, and I feel like next door app has lost their way a little bit in terms of being targeted. So I don't find it nearly as helpful as I thought it used to be pretty helpful, but now I don't need to know what's happening in some other part of Fresno for sure. So I think it's worth thinking about. I was going to ask about BIA too, if you checked in with them, but you think that's okay. Here's what I think is, I think this is the right direction. I think there's a couple things missing. So one is we have some exceptions to the radius requirements, and I'm thinking specifically of the Dry Creek Preserve, which under the agreements we have with that neighborhood, it's all of them, every time, anywhere near. So I think if you're going to develop some protocol, you might want to have sort of the scenarios or realities of there are those exceptions like that. So I would call that out so that if we're going to document it, it would be good to have here. The other thing I think that is the reality is I think it's as much timing as it is the radius, to Diane's question. The radius, I think, is what gets us into trouble. If you live in a neighborhood with larger lots and 600 feet could be 4 houses away, but I live 8 houses away, that's where I think we get into a little bit of struggle. So in some ways, I think it's timing plus radius. Now, the developer or the applicant is paying for these mailings, yeah? Or are we absorbing those costs?
Yeah, indirectly as part of the application fee, we've accounted for those costs.
So if my 2 cents would be, I feel like we need to look at the radius as much as the timing, because that's what gets us into trouble all of the time. We just don't capture enough. And I know it could be big and the database might be big, but I would like to see maybe a revisiting of that, because I think I can remember the time we expanded the general plan and specific plan amendments because there were 2 things at once. That seemed like it should be bigger. But in reality, 800 feet is it's not even a whole block, which if there was some significant development on the corner of, I don't know, Shaw and something, and I don't even get my whole block covered, I think that's the angst that we hear. So I think I like the direction. I think the timing is right, but I would like to ask staff to take a look at the radius to see what it would add in terms of cost. But that, to me, that engagement piece is where we get into trouble as much as the timing. I still think the best example ever is the city of Phoenix. I don't know if they still do, but they used to put a sign on the property, coming soon. This is under rezone. This is going to be, and again, I get it's a huge burden for staff, but I thought it was such a great way to communicate. If I drive by it and I live near it, I don't need to mail me anything. So I think there's maybe social media, but that old-fashioned sign could be helpful. And I know we don't want to get in the sign business. I get all that. But I think the idea is to engage folks sooner and more broadly. So I might ask that we can hold on to this, or we can, if you all could come back and look at the radius question, because that to me is it's an equation. It's not just the time. If it's still only 3 houses, it's only 3 houses. So that's not going to really help us. So that would be my comment on this item. So anything else for staff? And then I'll open the public comment. Thank you for starting the conversation, though.
Mayor,
yeah.
John, I do feel like that there's too many rules. And so because we have the other departments who have a smaller time frame, and so the public doesn't know. So either we have one that is broad like this, or we stick to whatever the law is, 10. And so that I prefer to just stick to 10, because then it's just across the board. It's a public hearing. You get these many days. I prefer that. I always felt, even in the last hearings, we were compliant.
it is the duty of citizens also to be engaged in the process. So I feel like if we do 17, it's just going to lead to where, let's just say we didn't do something for, I don't know, economic development, I don't know, some road closure, and they're just going to, how come you didn't tell us? And go, oh, we're only supposed to tell you 10 days. And they're going to go, well, how come over there 17 days or here 14 days? And so some consistency, I prefer that. And it could be where everything's longer. I'm open to that as well, and with some radius component to it. But I feel like there's just too many.
Madam Mayor, if I could, just question for staff. When we're talking about the 17 days, we're only talking about the mailed notice. The published notice that's going to go in the Business Journal, which is a newspaper of general circulation, which is what's required by the law, that's still going to be around the 10 days or whatever their publication dates are. They may fall on the 11th day or the 12th day, depending on when they publish notices. But I think to Vong's comment, we're only talking 17 days is only going to be for the mailed notice. For the published notice, we are basically complying with the state requirement, not going above and beyond, I think.
Correct. But I think to Drew's point, people are not exactly reading the fine type at the back of the Business Journal. So I think we still have an obligation to communicate what's happening. All right, anything else? Vong, good? Okay. Anyone else? Open the public comment. Anyone in the chambers wishing to comment on this item? Anyone online? No. All right, we'll bring it back to the council for your deliberation and pleasure on what to do with this today.
Mayor, Vaughn, do you want to have a more discussion on the 17 days versus the 10?
I really would like to hear from you guys. You give the notices. Will this create more issues in which we will have to deal with our public, or will this ease it? Because if you feel like, yes, there's still inconsistencies, but you're the ones who mail it. We'll hear the tail end of it. And so if you feel like there's no major conflict with all the other notice requirements that we have, then I'm good with it. So,
Renee, I would ask that the issue that came up that led to this recommendation was because we had submitted a notice or mailing on a Friday, which may not have gone out until a Monday, and people checking their mail once a week got it the day before the meeting. I think we could either stick with a 17-day or we could modify it, and it happens to be a Friday, is approximately 10 days before a following city council meeting, the week and a half later. We can take a look at it and see if we could just amend it to not be a Friday mailing, and it would reduce it to 11 days or whatever it is. But we're totally open to, there are different requirements in different departments for noticing, and we can't get past that. In this case, PDS is the single department that has the largest amount of public hearings, meetings, and that kind of stuff. And so we were just trying to address the particular issue we had with that one notification where we had a significant number of people get up and complain about the lack of notice they received, even though we were legally compliant with what was required. So the push here was going to be, let's just slide it back and give it to them approximately 7 days before that. But we're totally open to council's direction.
Thoughts?
I would rather us have the 17 days than have a group of disaffected citizens coming in going, I didn't get this until 4 days ago. And they haven't, weren't able to properly investigate what it was about. I think by giving the 17 days, we are erring on the side of caution. With the 10 days in the Business Journal, we are meeting the letter of the law. It just, I think it kind of strengthens transparency in government. My thought.
Other thoughts?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked down there, it wasn't on. Diane.
I just appreciate that this is coming to us because you're being responsive to what you've heard from the citizens. I think that's fantastic. And I do appreciate Councilmember Mwanatua's comments as well about keeping things kind of the same over departments, because I can appreciate how confusing that can be as well. But ultimately, I do think that, as Drew mentioned with transparency in that, I think that this is worth the doing. If you guys have investigated, you're hearing from the public, and this is kind of your internal solution to do that. So again, most importantly, I think it's great that it's responsive. Matt?
I was just going to agree that the 17 days sounds fine to me, so.
Ready for a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, I would, motion to approve the modifications of the 10-day public notice procedures for land use and planning projects for PDS.
Second?
Second?
Can that come with my hope that you might relook at the radius? It doesn't need to be in the motion, but just my comment would be to the motion that you take a look at the radius as well.
Yes, I have some ideas on how we can address that.
Okay. The other thing I would just say is, I mean, I wonder if there's a digital solution. I mean, I get my bank statement electronically. They ask me, do you want to opt in or out? I mean, there's probably some way, as our communications capability and team expands, there might be some way that we could digitally talk to people. And you can opt out of city mailings or opt in, and then you'll hear them all. So there's probably something else that we could maybe look at.
Yeah, of course. Okay. No, and that was sort of my comment about Nextdoor. That's the only one I'm familiar with. I know it has its limitations. I'm not even on it right now. But anything that we can utilize that could engage people in a manner that would be more effective, I think is great.
I think the city, when my dad was alive in Chula Vista, he got a weekly email from the city or whatever and talked about this, that, and the other, and he was older. He was 85 and opted into that. So I think there is probably some digital solution out there eventually. So there's a motion for the 17 days, and is there a second? I forgot already. Who was that? You did?
I did.
How'd that go for you? I forgot. Don't take it personally. There's a motion and a second. Roll call, no. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next up, under council items are various city council committee appointments. And I was going to make an intro comment, but John, I bet you're going to make one too.
I was going to make a brief one. It's going to be that after each election, there's a need to update the city council committee appointments. Beginning on page 250 of the agenda packet, you're going to have a 4- or 5-page document where staff has made a best effort to identify by highlighting those that need to be updated based on the changes in the city council. So at this point, I'd turn it over to the mayor to walk us through the council appointments for the next 2 years.
Thanks, John. And just for Matt and Diane, some of these are by position. The group calls for the mayor or some such. Others are by terms. They've been appointed to a term and they're going to fill out that term, and others are more kind of, I don't know, open for conversation. So let's just work our way through this. I was going to take myself off Cal ID system. Darn it. You didn't highlight that one.
Just because it's not highlighted doesn't mean you can't make a recommendation.
I would love to recommend that Councilmember Baskell sit on that committee because it's, see, don't laugh. I have sat through 5 years of, I'm sorry. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do you want to do it? Yes,
Yeah,
you'd be great at it.
Yes.
It does say in the description that it's not a council motion, it's done by the board. Is that correct? The Cal ID board? Am I reading?
Oh, it does say that.
It does say that, right.
Fine, I'll do it. Okay, when I'm done with it, though, it's all yours.
Well, I think
they might take it up, but I mean, that group doesn't meet as often, so I can stay until the board meets again.
Well, maybe it's simply fixed by sending, does Valerie even work for the
I don't know, she
anymore?
left. I thought she left.
I thought she left. Getting hold of them and just saying that we discussed it and we would like, prefer that they.
Yeah.
We can. We'll follow up.
Yeah, so, okay, you're back again. Phew, thank goodness. Good job. Good job. All right, and are you good being the alternate still to the Cal ID RAN board?
I don't need to be on that. Yeah.
I met once when you weren't there, that's it.
I-
Yeah, and so, but I get all the notices. If someone else would like to be the alternate, I'm willing to relinquish that post.
I think you're it. I think nobody is just, yeah, okay. All right. So, Matt, thank you for letting me volunteer you. You'll be perfect. And Vaughn, he'll go to all the meetings and you'll never have to go. It's great. All right. City Selection Committee, the representative is the mayor. So if you're okay with that, I will be the member, and Vaughn, as the mayor pro tem, can be the alternate. That's typically how we've done it here. If the mayor is the seat, then the mayor pro tem is the alternate. So are you all good with that? The Mosquito Abatement District is appointed a citizen who serves, bless her heart. Council of Governments is also the mayor, and the alternate typically is the mayor pro tem. Okay? Okay. The EDC board is a non-elected official. So in this case, it's Andy. I didn't know if you wanted to change that to Chad.
So I'll be maintaining that role for a period of time as Chad gets up to speed. He is the alternate, and we'll be transitioning. Okay.
All right. So the Convention and Business Bureau is Sean, the Media Authority are citizens that serve. The Fresno County Regional Transportation Mitigation Fee Agency meets after the COG meeting, so it continues in the mayor pro tem pattern. Okay. The FCTA board oversees the Measure C sales tax. I currently serve on that. I would like to continue to serve. This is one of those committees that the longer you serve, the more you at least understand what they're talking about. So my term expires in May of 23, so I'd like to continue to serve on that if good. The FCTA Executive Committee, that actually isn't a committee of record, so I think maybe we could just put it on inactive until it comes back for Measure C. Vaughn did an exceptional job on that, so if Measure C comes back, does that make sense to you, Vaughn? I mean, it's not really a thing, it only was a thing for Measure C, so I'd probably take that off until such time we decide what to do with Measure C. Flood control is a citizen that we appointed not too long ago, Sarge Green. The Joint Subcommittee on School Issues, this for the longest time was the mayor and a council member. I know, Vaughn, you joined was it May of 21? It seemed like it was a little, anyway. So I would like to serve on that at least for the next 2 years with the school district in the mayor role. And Vaughn, if you'd like to, wait. Your term expired, so how do you know how you feel about that? Anyway, so I would like to serve in that role for now. Vaughn, do you want to continue on that subcommittee?
That is one committee I would like to continue to serve on, and if there's one other one that I can get off of, so that way, you know, Diane or Matt can get on. I'm more than willing to.
Matt has Cal ID Rand. We're going to find an equally exciting one for you. Don't worry.
Yeah, that was the one I was interested in. So
yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd like to serve in that role just for the next couple of years, and then Vaughn is the alternate or the other member. So there's two of us. I think that's right. Are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. All right. Now, the North Kings Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board of Directors. Bob was our member. Bob had an interest in water. Drew, you were the alternate. So I don't know what the pleasure, anybody interested in that in particular. It really pays to develop some deeper knowledge around transportation, water, some of those issues on our council. So I guess, Drew, would you?
I would be interested in the water one.
You would be interested in the water one? Drew?
You want to be the member or your alternate?
Whatever you want to do. I only have Cal ID. They meet once a year, and we say yes to their.
I would be happy to stay in the alternate role, but so you can step in and get some water knowledge.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Personnel Planning Commission, the Air Pollution Control District Board is Drew, and has a term through 2024. Is that going to be your last term? Serve one more 3 years. So your term, you won't be able to serve after January of 24. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, I think what happens in January 24 is
It switches to another city.
it may switch to another city of over 100,000.
Got it. The San Joaquin Valley Special City Selection Committee is related to the Air District Board, so I think it makes sense that you continue to serve on that as the chair. Do you need an alternate, or what?
I don't think we need an alternate. I think it's only met once in the 4 years I've been on the board, so.
Okay. Do we need to have an alternate, staff?
I'd prefer to have an alternate just
Okay.
because the unusual case where somebody can't make it, I have somebody appointed that's going to attend a meeting.
Diane, would you like to be the alternate?
I'd be happy to be
Way
your
better than
alternate,
Cal
Drew.
ID ran. Don't tell the sheriff I'm making fun of Cal ID ran, okay? I know she would make fun of it too. All right, the South San Joaquin Valley District Policy Committee meetings are related to the League of California Cities. It's not called that anymore. What's it called? California Cities? Cal Cities. And these, we do not appoint these, so maybe what we can do on that one is it's an application process?
Yeah. When we do get notifications, we'll submit those to City Council and you submit an application to the Cal Cities for them to make a determination. It is a little bit of a commitment, though.
It is what?
A little bit of a commitment.
Yeah, so Diane, you might, and anybody might find those interesting. It does require travel to Sacramento. Just see what the opportunities are. I don't know I have not ever engaged at the state level on these things, so I don't know, but Bob was on public safety, you're on the public safety committee. We probably don't need two on the public safety committee. I don't know, maybe we do.
But Bob was the chair.
Okay.
So, and I was reappointed by Cal Cities.
Okay.
I think one of us there is fine for public safety. Vaughn, you're doing
I'm still doing
housing, which is really important. Are there any other committees?
There's environmental. What else?
There's
Government transparency.
Okay.
Environmental and government transparency.
John?
So one of those might be interesting to you, Diane. When we see the list, you can take a look at those and see. Yeah? Does that work? Okay. And then the last one is Upper Kings Basin Integrated Regional Water Management, also known as the Kings Basin Water Authority. This was Joe, again, keeping in his water theme, and Scott and Paul attend as the staff experts on that. So I don't know if Diane, you're interested in that, or Matt, you want to do two water things, or?
This does say the mayor is the representative.
I have a question though. I was
glad
there.
Somebody's reading these things.
I was there at this board probably 4 months ago, and there was some indication that it was going to become defunct. Is that?
Paul? And historically,
or did
the mayor's never gone to these meetings. The staff attends them.
Mayors are never gone?
Historically, they have not.
Historically, Paul Armadeiro is Assistant Public Utilities Director. Thank you, Mayor and council members. So historically, the mayor's named as the representative, but staff typically attends the advisory committees and the board meetings as well. There is some, depending on funding, if there's any more IRWIMP funding coming through, the agency will stay together. But North Kings GSA has kind of taken the lead in all of that, and so with that, there's a lot of funding expected to come through that route instead. But it's still together. Their agency's still together, but I don't know for how much longer. So.
All right. Well, in that case, Diane, thank you for reading. Reading is good. I'll be the representative, and mostly because it says attendance is optional. That's good. I like that. All right. So, are we good with these? Now, Diane, I don't want you to feel like, gosh, I didn't really get anything very interesting.
No, my schedule is a little crazy, so it's harder for me to make those kinds of commitments as it is, so.
All right. I think we've all been in the first run, you're like, well, really? But it comes. It sort of works its way through. So you're good?
I'm good.
Everybody good? You get all that? All right. I'll take let me open the public comment. Anybody in the audience want to comment on that very messy look at local government right then? Go, huh? That's what that meant. Anybody online?
No.
All right. I'll close the public portion. I'll entertain a motion to approve that committee appointment list that we just did.
Motion to approve the committee appointments.
Second.
All those in favor, any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, last item of business is item number 14, considering approval of 2023 annual schedule for city council meetings and the cancellation of January 3rd, 2023 city council meeting. John.
Thank you, Mayor and members of City Council. Two action items I'm asking for City Council this afternoon. The first is going to be that we were able to adjust the schedule for bringing things back to City Council, and staff is recommending we cancel the meeting of January 3rd, 2023, and come back to City Council for the first meeting next calendar year on January 9th.
All right. Do you want to talk about the other item as well?
Well, we can do them separately, if it's all right.
All right. There's only one action item, but okay. Any comments on canceling the meeting of January 3rd? Anybody in the public want to comment on canceling the meeting of January 3rd? You want to be here on January 3rd? Who's going to entertain you? I don't know, but it won't be this. All right. Anybody online? No. We'll close the public portion. Is there a motion to cancel the meeting of January 3rd?
Motion to approve the city council meeting and cancellation of January 3rd.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Diane. Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, except Mr. Mike, who wants to come here on January 3rd. You can still come here, though. You can sit right there. It'll be good. All right, motion carries. Second item is a discussion of the annual schedule for the council meetings. John?
Thank you, Mayor. Real quickly, the annual recess for the City Council has always been, from the 23 years I've been here, has always been in August. And what that means is going to be that City Council would only hold the first Monday in August and take approximately a month off and come back for the first meeting in September. Staff is recommending City Council move that recess from historically the August recess to move it to the July recess. And one of the reasons for that is going to be that it would correlate better with the Clovis Unified schedule, and the staff and council who have children in Clovis Unified would be able to have a little bit more discretion on when they take their vacations. So staff is recommending City Council just consider a recommendation that we move the City Council annual recess from August to July, and we'd be open for questions or comments.
Thoughts, feedback to staff on the move?
Works for me. I've always liked August because being off on those Mondays when you get the kids back to school has been so helpful. But you guys don't have young
You're
kids.
the only one with kids, so you get to weigh in on that twice.
But yeah, I'm open. We'll make it work. So
it was just getting feedback from staff on if asking council if they would consider it. And of course, the blue there indicates when school starts in both 22 and 23, which just kind of limits when staff could take vacation.
Other feedback? Drew?
Makes sense.
Matt? I don't like it, but I don't know why. I don't know. I can say that's. I liked August as well, but I don't want. I'm not suggesting that I don't want life to be easier for our staff. I think people are going to take vacation when they're going to take vacation, legitimately. So I don't know when the notes that there was a trend for people to miss in July. I don't know if it was a trend, but if you're going to plan a vacation, you're going to go on vacation because people go on vacation. So I don't know if you're going to get what you want in terms of not having council fully present. I mean, we could try. We can always go back if it doesn't work. If it's better for staff to have the month of July off.
We can give it a shot and see how it works. There could be other unknown consequences that
I don't. It's hard to know exactly. So would we meet on like Tuesday, July? Oops, wrong month. Would we meet on Monday, July 3rd, and then not the rest of July, or would we meet on July 10th? No, wait, wrong month.
Okay, so July of 23.
No, right.
Yeah, you're right, July of 23 right there. The 4th of July falls on a Tuesday. Realistically, we would meet on a Monday because that's the first 3 Mondays. But the reality is going to be that we do have some flexibility in how we maintain the schedule for City Council as far as the agendas goes. And if we could cancel the meeting of the 3rd, we would do that. We're going to take, this is all based on what's going on currently with City Council and how we can adjust as necessary.
It would make no sense to meet on the 3rd if you're going to try to take the month off. That makes absolutely no sense. So then you'd really only have 3 weeks off if you did that. So I feel like we're not going to meet at all in July then. We're not going to do that first Monday like we do in August. The first Monday in August, then we're off past Labor Day. That doesn't work as well here because otherwise nobody's going to take the week of that 4th of July off. So it feels a little clunky to me, but I don't know. So if we're not going to, our last meeting will be on, I don't even know what the date is, June something. June 19th. So we won't meet again until August 7th.
And again, we would take a look at it. I mean, potentially we could hold the one meeting on July 10th and you still have 4 weeks off.
I feel like that defeats the purpose of taking the month of July off. Now I'm into the second week in July. You guys work it out, but I don't think I think you're solving for a problem that's going to be a problem just if you reverse it. Yeah. So doesn't matter to me. But
okay. If we had something that was pressing, we could have a meeting on June 26th.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so
we can adjust.
I think we can take it for a walk and see if it resolves the problems that we think it might, and if it doesn't, then we just revisit
we go back.
But I do think of communicating to the building industry and others who have come to expect that we don't work in August, but we will be there in July. If they have some long-range plan for an application or whatnot, it would probably be worth just letting them know.
So we're going to meet with them on Wednesday, and we'll cover a couple items that we talked about tonight.
All right. Any other discussion on this? Anyone in the chambers wishing to comment on this July, August? Really important debate in local government. All right, online? No. Come on, nobody's online to comment on this? That's wrong. We'll close the public portion. I'll entertain a motion for the 2023 schedule.
Motion to approve the change in schedule.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and second to approve the 2023 schedule. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. City manager comments?
I have none.
Council comments. Matt and Diane, do you know what this is? You do. Do you? Okay, so you can chime in with anything you have, citizens' comments, things you've driven by to see. We typically report out on meetings we've attended representing the city, so that's the purpose of this. So we'll start with a veteran council member. Mr. Mwanatua, you go first.
It was too bad we didn't have our Christmas parade. I think kids are really looking forward to that. I just wanted to invite the council and staff and our citizens to Hmong New Year, December 29th, 30th, 31st, and the 1st. And so it'll be at the Fresno Fairgrounds. And then the opening ceremonies is the 29th at 10 o'clock. And so if you go, then look for me and we'll walk together during that opening ceremonies. And then I wanted to invite the council. Tomorrow night, Fresno State is holding sort of their first Hmong New Year celebration, 5:30 to 8:30, some cultural shows, and President Saul Sandoval will give a speech there, so it'll be there tomorrow night. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Long, Drew?
I've been exchanging emails with staff regarding tree mortality and some of the issues, especially on the north end of town. And hopefully, for future discussion, I have to assume that our friends in the state of California, regardless of how much rain we get, are still going to be wanting to cut back on our water usage. And quite frankly, driving around town, I see I see bushes that our landscape maintenance people they're trying to keep alive, but I think there comes a point where we just start taking some of those out, cap them off, and move on and collect the water savings. But I think that's a discussion that we're probably going to need to have sooner than later. That's all I have.
Thanks, Drew. Matt?
Yesterday, I went out to the Christmas giveaway sponsored by Clovis Police Officers Association at P&R Farms, and it's always such a big deal, and it's such a great event to see the families come through and pick up, boxes of food and goods and bicycles and Christmas trees and whatnot. And Clovis Rotary was a big sponsor of that as well. So it was just it's really nice to go out there and see everybody again and participate in that. That was a good deal. It's been going on for over 30 years and goes way back to Larry Vietti days and some of the older police officers that were part of that. So just wanted to say it was a great day to be out there, and really thankful to everybody for what they did.
Thanks, Matt. I'm now just muttering. Did we get invited? So maybe they could invite us sometime.
Well,
Do you know anybody in the PD?
I did. I sent a text and I said,
what's wrong with you two?
I sent a text and said, when is that giveaway? Is that this
Today.
weekend? And they said, that's tomorrow. I said, oh, okay.
So Kurt's gone,
Yes.
but maybe we could be invited because we might want to go. I don't know. But thanks for being there. Good job.
Thanks.
Diane.
This is one of my favorite times of year, and one of those things that I love so much about it is the lights, and Candy Cane Lane continues to be such a jewel of this community in this time of year, and so I just want to encourage everybody to take some time out of what I know is busy schedules for everyone right now, but enjoy that little bit of the season and check out what our community members are doing over there at Candy Cane Lane, because it is really fantastic.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Merry Christmas. I forgot that we won't even meet. Yeah, right? So, Merry Christmas to our citizens, Merry Christmas to you guys, too. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Well, not to go to ruin that season, but I'm going to talk about two meetings that I attended. One was FCTA. That meeting was on the 14th, and the two items of interest I thought worth noting were, we talked a little bit about Measure C, not any specifics, but of the 4 transportation sales taxes in California on this last ballot, 3 of them failed, and the only one that passed was the 50% plus 1. So none of them got to the 66% threshold. So that was an interesting comment. And the second is there's a piece of legislation working its way through Sacramento, who names this stuff, called the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, that is working its way through, that would impose restrictive rules on raising taxes, fees, assessments with this 50% plus 1 threshold, removing that so that you can't have taxpayer or citizen-initiated initiatives, too many initiated, but citizen-driven initiatives would need the same threshold as a city-sponsored or an agency-sponsored. So we'll just see where that goes. And the next day, I went to COG, and I would think this group, COG came back together because at the previous meeting they didn't have enough affirmative votes on the Inland Port project, so really it was to support the grant application for the Inland Port. So for Matt and Diane, if you haven't heard that, I'm sure staff could kind of get a connection on the work around the Inland Port. It's now called the Trade Port Initiative, but it's a pretty transformational look at how goods will move across California, using ports and using inland valleys like the Valley and San Bernardino.
The one in Castle?
Includes Castle, yeah. It's it's a gigantic undertaking, but it would change the environmental impacts of transportation here. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. But I have one more thing, and then I'll go to you. And then just for the circle back, and I'm sorry I can't remember the individual's name, but maybe a month ago, we had an OLPH parishioner come and talk about the food pantry. And I did send a letter to Father Michael, and he appreciated the letter. He said the pantry is actually not closing, that they still will be collecting food and collecting donations, and then partnering with other organizations who are better equipped to distribute them, like the Salvation Army. So it's you're not going to be able to drive up to OLPH and get the food, but they're going to still kind of make the connection. And Catholic Charities, the executive director, Jeff DeGretti, is still very committed to try to serve Clovis. So if our staff or team is aware of other places in our city that could be a distribution site for some of the things gathered by OLPH, I think it would be really important to support them. But they're not shutting it down. They're just changing the kind of the distribution to be not quite so direct. So I was happy to hear back from him. It was much appreciated. And so to the parishioner who asked us to comment, did comment and got a nice letter back from Father Michael. So I just wanted to close that loop. Okay, and then who had one more? You?
I just have a report out. I attended an air board meeting last Thursday, and we approved a $6.1 million grant from the state for zero-emission commercial landscape equipment. I'll send staff an email on this, and I'm going to reach out to some of the places like Jensen and Pilgard Cemetery District and some of the other districts that are out there if they're interested in this equipment. And $6.1 million will go a long way because these things don't cost $50,000, $60,000. So there's going to be little chunks that some districts will be able to take care of. So I'm going to reach out to them, but that's the only other thing.
And I forgot one more thing. On the FCTA, the City of Clovis did have an application through the New Technology Fund of Measure C, and I wish I didn't bring the piece of paper, but it was funded $400 and some thousand with the Transit Center and I think it's the app around the kind of a call hailing system, I think is the way Amy described it. So that was funded by FCTA. All right, now we're all really done. With that, I will say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you here and probably both of you online. But thanks for being a part of it, being a part of our community. We are going to adjourn into closed session. And I think what I'm supposed to say is we are not going to take action. Is that right?
Yes, we are not asking for action tonight.
Not asking for action.
So we will not anticipate having to report out any action from closed session tonight.
It is on the agenda, though, so let me just ask if there's anybody here, but I know the answer is no, to speak to the closed session item as it's printed on the agenda? All right, seeing none, meeting adjourned, and we will go into closed session. Thank you all for being here.